For decades, there's been this sort of curse hanging over Hollywood, the curse of the bad anime adaptation. You've seen it happen time and time again, right? These incredible, beloved animated stories from Japan get turned into live-action projects that just, well, they completely miss the mark. But then One Piece sailed onto our screens, and somehow this live-action version of a legendary, almost untouchable story became a massive global hit. It smashed streaming records and seemed to finally shatter that curse. It's a show that's now loved by millions of brand new fans, and maybe the biggest surprise of all, the hardcore, die-hard fans of the original story.
But here's the thing. Even with all that incredible success, there's a question that keeps popping up among critics and viewers. We can all pretty much agree the show is good, right? Maybe even great. But is it a true masterpiece? For a lot of people, the answer is a hesitant no. So what's holding it back? What's that thin line between a fantastic, successful show and a flawless work of art? That's what we're going to dive into. We're going to explore the few critical flaws that seem to keep this amazing show from reaching absolute perfection. Now, this isn't about tearing the show down, it's about understanding the specific creative choices that make all the difference.
So, the general feeling is, this is a fantastic adaptation, but it's not perfect. In this explainer, we're going to break down 3 specific, recurring critiques that keep coming up. First, we're going to talk about the show's visuals, the actual look and feel of the world. Then we'll get into the action sequences, because let's be real, what's a pirate adventure without some killer fight scenes? And finally, we're going to look at its storytelling pace. These 3 things are basically the pillars holding up any great adventure story, and by looking at them closely, we can really see what's working and what could be even better.
Okay, let's start with the very first thing you notice when you watch anything, what you see with your own eyes. Before a character even says a word, the world they're in has to feel real. It has to pull you in. It's about more than just the plot or the acting, it's about the very look and feel of the entire environment. So our first stop is all about how the world of One Piece is presented visually and the very specific choices they made to bring this crazy, fantastical setting into the real world.
This visual issue has been summed up by a lot of people with a very specific and I think very memorable term, the cosplay problem. Now, what on earth does that mean? It's not a dig at the amazing art of cosplay itself, not at all. It's really just a shorthand to describe a specific feeling you get while watching. The feeling that you're seeing people dressing up as the characters instead of truly being them in a world that feels real and lived in. It's kind of like the difference between a Halloween costume and an actual set of clothes you wear every day. So when you hear that quote, it feels like cosplay, not a real lived-in world, what's that really getting at? Well, it points to this idea that even with a gigantic budget and incredible attention to detail, the show's whole look can sometimes feel a little artificial. Think about the difference between a movie set and a real historical building. One feels pristine and built for a camera, while the other has history, scuffs, and a story to tell. So instead of a gritty, tangible pirate world that you could almost smell and touch, it can sometimes feel more like a perfectly arranged stage play where every prop is brand new and everything is just a little too clean.
Okay, so what exactly is causing this artificial feeling? It's really a few different ingredients all mixed together. First up, let's talk colors. The show is incredibly bright, super saturated, which was a deliberate choice to perfectly match how the anime looks. And while it's beautiful, that level of brightness can sometimes fight against a sense of realism. Second, the costumes. Now they are amazingly accurate to the original designs, but they almost always look brand new, like they were just picked up from the dry cleaner. And finally, the sets themselves. They can feel completely pristine, totally untouched. Let me give you a really simple example. Think about a crew of pirates. These are people who live on a wooden ship on the ocean for months at a time. They're getting into fights, they're sailing through storms, they're getting sprayed with salt water. Their clothes should not look like they just came out of the washing machine, right? You'd expect to see rips, patches, salt stains, maybe colors faded by the sun. It's those tiny little details that tell a story and create a sense of history. When those details are missing, it just creates this little disconnect in your brain, making the world feel less real, less lived in, and contributing to that slightly artificial, almost plastic look.
Now, I know what a lot of you might be thinking, but wait, it's supposed to look exactly like the anime. That's the whole point. And you know what? That is a totally fair argument. Being faithful to the source material is a huge deal. But this brings up a really important question when you're adapting something. Is a direct 100% carbon copy translation always the best way to go? Sometimes the best adaptations are the ones that know when to change things, just a little, to make them feel more real in a new format. To really get what I mean, let's compare One Piece to another huge, really successful live-action anime adaptation. What we're looking at here are 2 totally different ways to adapt a story. Let's take the Rurouni Kenshin movies. In the original anime, the main character has this wild bright red hair.
It's iconic. But in the live-action movies, they toned it way down to a much more realistic, darker auburn color. Why? Because they knew that in a story set in historical Japan, a guy walking around with neon red hair would look silly and fake. It would pull you right out of the story. By making that one smart change, they made their entire world feel more grounded, more believable. One Piece, on the other hand, went all in on being as visually faithful as possible. And it's that commitment to directly copying the anime's super bright colors and squeaky clean look that leads to that feeling of artificiality. It's a trap that the Kenshin films were able to avoid by choosing to adapt for realism instead of pure accuracy.
You might be thinking that this plastic look is because they didn't have enough money, but that could not be further from the truth. The budget for One Piece is an absolutely staggering $18 million per episode. That's more than a lot of blockbuster movies. So the issue isn't a lack of cash, it's a very specific creative choice. To build its wild, fantastical world, the show leans very heavily on digital sets, on green screens, and on computer-generated imagery, or CGI. And while the results can look really cool and epic, they often just don't have that tangible, gritty feeling of a real place that was physically built. This reliance on the digital world is a huge contributor to that cosplay effect we've been talking about.
Okay, so we've talked about the world itself. Now let's move on to the second big critique, and this one gets to the heart of any great adventure story, the action. While a lot of the fight scenes in One Piece are genuinely thrilling and choreographed really well, there's a recurring weakness that a lot of people have noticed, and it all circles back to the show's most important character. And let me be super clear here. The action in the show is not bad across the board, not even close. Many of the fights, especially the ones with the swordsman Zoro, are just spectacular. They have brilliant choreography and a real sense of impact and danger. The problem that critics keep pointing to is specifically tied to the main character, Monkey D. Luffy. It's how his very unique, very strange, rubbery powers are shown on screen that creates a bit of an issue for people. So, Luffy's main power is that his body is basically made of rubber, all because he ate a magical gum fruit. This means he can stretch and inflate his arms and legs to launch these incredibly powerful attacks. In a live-action show, pretty much the only way you can show this is with CGI. The problem is, this digital effect often makes his powers look, well, artificial. It has that same plastic quality we talked about with the visuals. His attacks, like his famous gum pistol, can feel like they don't have any real weight or impact behind them. They can seem slower, less forceful than they do in the anime. Basically, there's a disconnect between being told that this is a devastating punch and what we actually see on screen. One critic even joked that his attacks sometimes look so light, it's like he's giving the villain a massage instead of a knockout blow.
And this really highlights a deeper problem, a concept we can call an expectation mismatch. Let me break that down. In the very same show, we have the swordsman Zoro. His fights are done with practical effects. You've got real stunt performers, physical swords, and amazing grounded choreography. You can hear the clash of steel, you see the strain on the actors' faces, you feel the speed and the power. His fights feel real, they feel gritty, they feel visceral, they are, to be honest, awesome. But then the show will cut to a fight with Luffy and suddenly it's all computer generated. Because Zoro's fight sets such a high realistic standard for what action looks like in this world, Luffy's CGI-based combat just looks weaker and less satisfying when you compare them. The show's own success in one area accidentally makes its main character's coolest abilities feel like a bit of a letdown.
Alright, let's move on to our final point. And this is arguably the most important flaw, because it affects the entire structure of the story. Pacing is like the heartbeat of a narrative. It controls the rhythm, the flow, and the emotional journey. This isn't about how the show looks or how a character fights. It's about the speed of the story itself. And for a lot of people, the main issue is that the grand adventure of One Piece just feels incredibly rushed.
To really put this in perspective, you have to understand a little bit about the original story. A story arc in a huge series like this is like a whole chapter in a book, with its own unique island, new characters, big conflicts, and a final resolution. The first season of the live-action show takes 5 of these complete individual story arcs from the original manga and crams them all into just 8 episodes. That is a ton of plot, world building, and character development to squeeze into such a tiny amount of time. And making that choice to compress the story so much has these huge cascading consequences for everything else.
So this isn't just about the story moving too fast. This breakneck pacing actually kicks off a damaging chain reaction. I want you to think of it like a line of dominoes. The very first decision to condense the story is like tipping over that first domino. That one action then directly causes another problem, which in turn causes another, and then another, until eventually the very soul of the story starts to get a little bit weaker.
So let's just walk through exactly how this domino effect plays out step by step. First, to fit 5 story arcs into 8 episodes, you have to condense the plot. There's no way around it. That's the first domino. Now, because the story is so condensed, tons of scenes and even whole side stories have to be cut out just to save time. This means that crucial world-building moments, scenes that explain the history, the politics, and the really unique places in this massive world, they're just gone. That's the second domino. And when those scenes of exploring and learning about the world are cut, the moments where characters just talk and bond and show us who they really are, those get sacrificed too. The quiet human moments are always the first to go, which means character depth is lost. That's domino number 3. And finally, when you lose the rich world building and you lose those deep character moments, the journey itself starts to feel less like a grand epic quest and more like a checklist of plot points to get through. The actual spirit of adventure itself is diminished. And that's the final domino.
So what does this actually look like in the show? What are we really missing out on because of this speed? Well, we're missing the quiet moments of the crew just living together on their ship, the scenes of them laughing, arguing, and slowly becoming this weird, wonderful found family. Without those moments, their powerful bond can feel a little bit unearned. We also don't really get to see them struggle with the dangers of the ocean itself, like trying to navigate a crazy storm or running out of food. Without that struggle, their journey just feels less difficult. And this is a big one. Major villains and entire organizations, like the mysterious Baroque Works, are introduced and then dealt with so quickly that they don't get enough screen time to feel like a truly scary worldwide threat. All of this combines to make what should be a grand, challenging journey feel, well, a little too easy and a little too quick.
But, and this is really important, the show itself gives us a perfect example of what it can do when it avoids this flaw. The storyline about the character Tony Chopper, the crew's adorable doctor, was given much more time to breathe over its episodes. The show actually slowed down, it focused on the deep emotional core of his tragic backstory, and it let the characters have those crucial quiet moments of connection. And you know what? It is widely considered one of the most powerful and successful parts of the entire season. It proves that when the show just takes a breath and lets the story unfold at a more natural, character-driven pace, it has the potential to be truly brilliant television.
So, after looking at the show's visuals, its action, and its pacing, what's the final takeaway here? We've looked at the canvas, the combat, and the clock. Let's pull all these ideas together to form a final verdict on why this really great show just misses that mark of being a true masterpiece for some viewers. Okay, let's recap this slowly and clearly one more time. The first flaw is the visuals. Because of that creative choice to be hyper-faithful to the anime's bright colors and clean designs, the world can sometimes feel artificial, almost like a stage play. It's missing the grit and realism you'd expect from a rough pirate story. The second flaw is the action, specifically focused on the main character Luffy. The heavy use of CGI for his rubber powers makes his attacks feel weightless and less powerful, especially when you put them right next to the practical, hard-hitting fights of other characters like Zoro. And finally, the third and most structural flaw is the pacing. By cramming 5 huge story arcs into just 8 episodes, the show is forced to sacrifice crucial world building and character development, which in turn waters down the grand spirit of adventure that is the absolute heart of One Piece.
Now, it is absolutely crucial to say this one last time. Pointing out these flaws isn't about condemning the show or taking anything away from its incredible success. The live-action One Piece is a massive achievement. It is fun, it's heartfelt, and it's a genuinely fantastic adaptation that has brought so much joy to millions of people all over the world. This analysis is really just about exploring that very narrow but very fascinating gap between being great and being a flawless masterpiece. And all of this really leaves us with a final big question, one that goes beyond just One Piece and applies to every adaptation of a beloved story. In a world where it is so incredibly hard to get these things right, is a successful adaptation, one that captures the main story and is loved by tons of people, is that good enough? Or should creators always be chasing that impossible ideal of a perfect, seamless masterpiece, even if it means changing the original story more dramatically to make it work in a new way? It's a question that really asks us what we value most in storytelling. And honestly, there's no easy answer.
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe and hit the bell to the later update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end and see you in the next video.